Hello and happy Monday. It is time for the Extraordinary Talk Show with your host, Della Hill. Welcome. I can't see you, but I'm so glad to imagine you out there watching and listening. Maybe there's more of you out there than I am imagining because I only really know of one or two, but a few people sometimes let me know that they're watching too, and I always appreciate that. I love hearing people tell me the things that they got from the show and how it helped them and benefited them. So if that might be working for you, if that's happening for you, if something that I've said made some kind of difference for you, tell us about it. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, leave a comment and let me know because that really feeds me. Okay, I'm here to help you guys and support you guys and hopefully give you guys some great skills that might help you live your own life a little bit better. But it's also super reaffirming to me to hear back about some of those things. So if that's happening, please let me know. All right, here we are with today's show, which is about imaginary walls and brain barriers. When I say imaginary walls, I literally mean walls that you have imagined, walls that you have put up and created in your own head that limit your life. Barriers that you have put in place that hold you back from your own life. That's what we're here talking about. And let me start by telling you a couple things. First of all, let me give you a scenario. Let's say that you went shopping for a car. You needed a car, you had budgeted it, you'd figured out how you were going to do it. You got to the car dealership and you found a car that you kind of liked. It met some of your requirements. And then as you're talking to the salesman about it, he says, but you got to know this is a really special car because this car is guaranteed to always keep you safe because it will always go 10 miles an hour under the speed limit. If the speed limit is 35, it'll go 25. If the speed limit's 55, it'll go 45. Speed limit's 80, like it is on some highways here in Utah, you'll only go 70, and that way you'll know you'll always be safe. Okay, that might be spun to make you feel like you're safe, but would you buy that car? I like to drive fast, and if I was offered a car that would only go 10 miles an hour under the speed limit, I would not buy that car. I don't want to be held back by that kind of limitation. Something that I have no power over, something I have no control over. It just is. And if I choose to buy that car, I accept that limitation. I wouldn't do it, would you? Maybe you would for your teenager, but that's a different story. That's not what we're talking about. So what we're going to talk about is those kind of limitations that we have in our own brains, you and me, because I have them too. Limitations that we put into our own head, limitations that we take on and accept and follow that limit us, that hold us back, that keep us from going the full speed limit or above it. I mean, it's one thing to only go the speed limit, at least then you're following the rules and everything's safe as it should be. But why would you limit yourself to so much lower than standard, so much lower than what you're able to do? Let me tell you about another guy. His name is Wim Hof. He's European. I don't remember what country he's from. Wim Hof is so cool because he's a father of 5 and he has broken 21 Guinness World Records. And these aren't things like he played the longest Jenga game, okay? He took the longest ice bath. This man sat in an ice bath, a bathtub full of water and ice for 1 hour, 52 minutes, and 42 seconds. Guys, I hate being cold. My brother did the polar plunge for New Year's, and I was like, nope, see ya, have a good time. I would not jump in a cold lake. And the lakes we have here in southern Utah aren't even that cold. They're not even freezing, probably. But no way was I going to do that because I don't like cold water. I don't like being cold. Wim Hof doesn't care. Temperature has a very, very little effect on him because he says he can turn his thermostat up using his mind. The ice bath is only one example. This man climbed Mount Everest in a pair of shorts. I'm not kidding. No shirt, no coat, no hat, no pants. I'm not sure what he's wearing for shoes. I'm guessing he had shoes on. A pair of shorts. He's done this. Another thing he did was he ran a full marathon, which is 26.2 miles. I've done half of that 4 times. I've never done that. 26.2 miles across the Namibia desert with no water. Okay, when I ran my half marathons, I usually had a Camelback on, and I stopped at every single water station because I've been dehydrated. I know it sucks. I've actually worked in the medical tent at the end of marathons when people came in dehydrated, and it sucks. This guy did it in the desert, didn't drink any fluids the entire time. To me, as a nurse, that sounds unsafe. Risk of dehydration, hyponatremia, that my nurse mind immediately goes there. But he did it, and he did it really, really well. Because this is a man who has learned to do the opposite of what 99.9% other humans do. Most of us live with that speed limit 10 miles an hour underneath. We just do. We've accepted that even though our potential might be up here, we're good with only here. And maybe we don't cognitively say that, but the decisions that we've made, the beliefs that we've taken on, the ideas that we have accepted as true, whether they are or not, limit us. They hold us back. They cause us to never be able to get all the way up to the speed limit. And this guy, Wim Hof, he has gotten permission from the Highway Patrol to go 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, okay? This guy has figured out how to change those blocks, those imaginary barriers in his brain, and not only remove them, but raise the bar. This guy's pretty fascinating. I watched an interview with him, and I've read on him and watched some videos about him. Wim, W-I-M, Hof, H-O-F. Very simple name, Wim Hof. They call him the Iceman. And what I love about it is he clearly says, I just turned the thermostat down in my mind or up in my mind. He can control, and they've actually studied him while he was in, guess what he was using, because that's my favorite thing, meditation. While he was meditating, they were able to track his mind and recognize where his mind was sending signals in his body related to temperature. This guy can literally close his eyes, quiet his mind, and make his body warmer or cooler. And I've heard of ninjas who can do that too, not like real ninjas, who also have that ability and can even slow their heart rate down to make them harder to find. They can even pretend to be dead and be unrecognizable as alive because they know how to go into their mind and change that. And that's fascinating. And that's something that you and I are capable of. But not only do we not accept that, but we have accepted other limitations that hold us so far back. Let's talk about some of those limitations. There's 3 basic categories that I came up with for you today. One is assumptions, uninformed judgments. And we all do this, right? I want to tell you about an assumption I made about 21 years ago. I went to church one day and I sat behind this girl. And at the time I was a few months pregnant with my first baby. I was recently married. And this girl was sitting in front of me. She was gorgeous, like one of those women that anybody who looks at her does a double take because she's just beautiful, with her sitting with her very attractive husband and her darling little baby. And I took one look at her and I thought, I bet you she's a snob. And later, I'll tell you the short version of the story. I got to know her. I got to know her really well. And I ate those words. Her name's Barbara. 21 years later, she and I are still friends. She's one of those people that last week we talked about how your vibration, you might vibrate at the same level as somebody else. When I actually got to sit and talk to her, she and I were vibrating very, very similar. We had so much in common. We had so much shared between us. And I had to eat my words because I thought this girl was a snob. I took one look at her, saw how pretty she was, and assumed she was a snob. And she was anything but. And had I held on to that judgment, I would have missed out on a 20-year friendship from one of the, not only just beautiful, but one of the most smart, the smartest, driven, passionate, powerful women that I know. At the age of 40 or 41 last year, she graduated from Brigham Young Law School and became a lawyer, passed her boards, and is now working as a lawyer. And she's still every bit as gorgeous as she was 20 years ago. But I made the assumption that because she was pretty, she was a snob. And if I hadn't changed that belief, I would have missed out on having my own life blessed by having an amazing friend in this amazing woman. So before you make assumptions, snap judgments about other people, recognize when you do it. We all do it. What I believe is that the first thought that comes to your brain is what's been trained to come to your brain. Maybe you trained it, maybe somebody else trained it. The second thought is how you reframe it and how you choose to take that. So my first assumption was, she's pretty, she must be a snob. I was able to reframe that and recognize it. And I even went back and apologized to her. And she cried. And she said, you know what, Della? That happens all the time. So many times in my life, people have seen how pretty I was, even though she really didn't believe that she was prettier than anybody else, and automatically judged her as being less than she is. Because she's pretty, they thought she was dumb. Or because she's pretty, they thought she was a snob. I was guilty of it. So imagine how your assumptions are limiting you and what you're missing out on because of those assumptions. Another one is limiting beliefs. And we've talked about this. Most of these come from the first 5 to 7 years of your life when your brain is basically an empty hard drive and downloading everything. Everything you see, everything you hear gets downloaded right into your soft gray matter, which at that point doesn't even have firing neurons all the way through it, right? You are building those brain pathways at that age. Everything that you see, hear, and learn starts new brain pathways at those very, very early ages. And very often, pretty much it happens to all of us, we get told ideas or concepts that we accept because we're children and we don't know better. But very often when we're adults and can know better, we don't realize we have these limiting beliefs. We don't know they are limiting beliefs, and we never take the time to go back and reframe them. Some limiting beliefs might be, I'm not good enough, especially if your parents or those that you loved and were around told you when you were little that you're not good enough. Chances are, if you heard that as a kid, you still believe it now. And that, my friends, is a limiting belief that's not true. You have to reframe that or you will always believe it. That's the biggest umbrella one is I'm not enough. It might be not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, or in my friend's case, too pretty to be enough. Clearly she got all of her, what I thought when I first saw her was clearly she was in the front of the gorgeous line and missed out on all of the smarts, strength, and all the other stuff that my friend Barbara clearly has. But I assumed that she didn't because she had that, so she couldn't have the other stuff. Another limiting belief that many girls have is that it's enough to be pretty. You don't need more if you can be pretty. You don't need to be smart if you're pretty. You don't need to be a hard worker if you're pretty. And those things can potentially be true. I know women who have lived to prove those things true and have successfully. However, those women also didn't have the control and empowerment in their life that truly would have brought them joy and fulfillment, because everything that they got in life was given to them because they were pretty. They didn't really work for it. They didn't really earn it. And we know if you don't work and earn something, you don't appreciate it. Also, when you can work and earn something, you don't just appreciate the thing that you're getting When you do that, you have fulfilled a commitment to yourself. When you say, I want that, I'm going to do what it takes to get it, then you do it. You get the prize in whatever the thing was that you're trying to get. But the bigger prize that's even more important than that to me is that feeling you get in your gut that I did it. I accomplished it. I took on this challenge and I can do it. One limiting belief that we have is that we can't do big things, that we shouldn't try. And that might come from our parents telling us when we're little, oh, honey, you shouldn't try that. That's too hard. And maybe that's true for a 4-year-old, but it's not true for a 34-year-old. But we still believe it. Oh, no, I can't do that. My mom told me that's a bigger thing than I can handle. Might have been true when you were 5. It's not true now. But we still hold on to that. We still have that imaginary barrier in our head, that brain barrier that we've created. The only reason it's there is because we allow it to be. It's not true. And yet we believe it. Another one, and this one I haven't talked too much on the show about, but I might because it's one of my favorites, is thinking errors. Thinking error. A thinking error is something that you do in the moment to protect yourself, and you do it in your own head. And it's because we all have our automatic natural defense mechanisms, right? That's why we have the fight or flight. So if you're in a scary situation, your heart rate's going to go up, your respiration's going to go up, you're going to get endorphins, and that gives you the ability to either face what's challenging you or run away from what's challenging you. Fight or flight, right? We have mental barriers too, mental things that protect us, our own mental fight or flight. And that is when we are in a situation where usually what happens is it's a situation where we are asked to be responsible for ourselves and our decisions. And it could be it right there in the moment when you're making the decision. Like if you are trying to cut your carbs and calories, but you see a brownie, what are you going to tell yourself to make yourself think it's okay? That is a thinking error. Whatever thought it is that you are using to rationalize that behavior is a thinking error. I used to know about 23, 25 thinking errors. I'm not going to go into all those right now. There's a few that I want to tell you about. One is blaming. It's somebody else's fault, something else's fault. Maybe if you want that brownie, you could say, I've had a stressful day. I deserve it. So what you're doing is blaming your day instead of looking at the situation saying, if I'm truly going to be honest with myself, if I'm truly going to meet my own contract that I set with myself, I'm not going to have this brownie. But because you want it so bad, you tell yourself whatever it takes in that moment to rationalize it and feel good about it in order to be able to do it. The biggest problem with that is not the calories and carbs that the brownies are going to do. One problem with it is that you may go into another thinking error of absolutes, grandiosity, where you might think, well, I ate one, I might as well eat the rest of the pan. And my friends, when you're dealing in absolutes, you got to remember only the Sith deal in absolutes. You're not a Sith. You're a Jedi. Cut it out. Another thinking error you might use is victim stance. And two of the biggest that are used are blaming and victim stance. And those two always go together, because if you are making yourself a victim, it means you have someone to blame. And if you have someone to blame, it means you're making yourself a victim. And if you are blaming someone else, you will always be a victim. Aren't you ready to be done with that? How many times in your life have you thought, I'm a victim? It's that person's fault. It's my husband's fault. It's my wife's fault. It's my kid's fault. It's the time's fault. Maybe it's not even another person. And guys, I did this today, and I want to tell you about it. I got up early today because I had an early appointment, and I got halfway ready, and then I went, I got time. And I sat down on the bed and played on my phone. Whose fault was that? That was my fault. Then it was time. I had about 10 minutes left to go, and I was kind of scrambling. I wanted to wear my blue shoes because I really like my blue shoes. They went with my outfit. You can see I got a lot of blue on. I could only find one blue shoe, and I got mad And I was irritated and I snapped at my husband. Sorry, Chris. It wasn't his fault. In my mind, I was trying to make it anybody else's fault but my own, because I didn't want to admit that even though I had been responsible and gotten up early, that I had been irresponsible and sat down on the bed and played on my phone. I didn't want to admit that it was my fault I couldn't find my shoe. I didn't want to admit that it was my fault I only had 2 minutes. Especially because I'm pretty sure I know where the other shoe is. I'm pretty sure it's in the other closet. And if I had grabbed it one of the last 3 times I saw it there and put it back where it went, I would have been able to find it. But instead, I got angry, I got irritated, and it wasn't possible in my mind right then for anything to be my own fault. I wasn't willing to look at it that way. I was just irritated. And I actually got in the car and drove away. And I started thinking about the show today and about what I was going to talk about. And I went, great job, Della, because you totally just did that. You totally just used all those thinking errors. You blamed your husband. You blamed your house. You blamed your dog. But did you take any accountability for that yourself? No. And when I got to a red light, texted my husband and I said, I'm really sorry for snapping at you. And he was super, super supportive about it. I'm not checking the comments on Facebook right now, but I bet you he's commenting on that right now. So we all do it. And I want you to recognize it's human to do it. It's human to have that desire to defend yourself in your own head. It's your mental fight or flight, where instead of recognizing the situation for what it is, you just want to blame everything else and everyone else. But the thing is, that doesn't change anything. It's not until you recognize where you're making the thinking error that you can actually make it better. So my sister Carrie texted me before the show and said, hey, what are you talking about today? And I told her kind of some of what my thoughts are. And she shared an experience with me. And I asked her permission to share this with you. Carrie has, for much of her life, looked in the mirror and thought she was fat. And the truth is, 99% of girls do. But the thing was, she was telling herself lies every time she looked in the mirror. I'm not talking about what her actual weight was or whatever. That's actually besides the point. What mattered was that when she looked in the mirror, she said mean things to herself. And she went to a conference. And at this conference, they were asked to write down the things that they said to themselves in the mirror. And Carrie, when she wrote it down, when she took it out of her head and put it on a piece of paper, she recognized, wow, I'm hard on myself. And that wasn't the biggest part. The lady who was giving the class took a picture of her own daughter, and she put that in front of the class. And then she took everybody's comments from the whole class, things that like what Carrie had written about what she said to herself when she looked in the mirror. And the teacher read those comments as though she was saying them to her daughter. Now, you may or may not have a teenage daughter. You may or may not know a teenage girl, but you might remember what it was like when you were a teenager. If you had a teenage daughter, would you say those things to her? And if you would, maybe you should reconsider that. If you are saying anything to yourself in your own head that you could not speak lovingly to your own child, why are you saying that? Why would you hurt yourself in such a manner that you would not hurt anyone else? You wouldn't do that to somebody else. Why is it okay to do it to yourself? So recognize, that's the very first step, is to recognize. Recognize when you are using a brain barrier. Then you got to reframe it. And the most important thing after that is to act on that reframe. Tony Robbins says, sometimes the most important thing you can do is anything. Reframing it is one thing. Acting on that reframing helps cement it, helps make it firm in your head. Okay? The action is critical. And that's going to be different for you no matter what it is that your issue is. But acting on it, choosing to reframe it, and then act on that reframe. Because reframing it tells your brain a different way to think. Acting really creates the mental pathways, the neuron pathways that are going to create new beliefs for you, that are going to help you recognize that your car can go the speed limit and 10, 20, 30 miles over safely if you do it right. You are capable. There's Wim Hof, the Iceman. He has nothing you don't have. He was not born with any skill, talent, or ability that you weren't born with. The only difference is how he uses his brain. And one thing that's really interesting about him too is he trains every day. It doesn't matter where he is. He doesn't use gyms. He's very, very physical and athletic because he trains everywhere he is, anywhere he goes. He will run, he'll lift weights, he'll meditate, he'll work on his mental temperature. Whatever it is, he does it every single day. And if you want to retrain your brain to eliminate those brain barriers and your imaginary walls that you've created, you have to do it every day. If you want to have an extraordinary life, you have to do little extraordinary things every day. And if you can change one thought, reframe it, and make it into an action, my friends, that is one extraordinary action. And that's what I want for you. My time has run out. Remember, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I only want you to think for yourselves. Leave me a comment, ask me a question, let me know what I can do for you, or if there's other things you'd like to hear me talk about. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will be here next week, Monday at 4:30 on Radio St. George 100.3. Thanks, friends. Hi, this is Della with The Extraordinary Talk Show. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and check out some more of the amazing videos that we have to share with you.